Howdy, folks. I'm not going to say happy Monday because here it is not. We will start with the pre-show, and I wonder where it's going to start.
You don't know, Mike.
No, I think they're probably going to start with the announcement of the Hall of Famers, but we'll see. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to do the Baseball Hall of Fame because I did just write about it on Full Press, and so I just think it's interesting. I didn't bring up guys who I think are in the 70s that should make it. We all have guys that we think should make it, but my guys my three that I thought that should make it for the guys that are sort of in the lead or close to the lead, and I happen to like Jimmy Rollins. I don't like the Phillies, obviously, but I have a lot of respect for him. I covered him, and I thought, he was a top shortstop. Beltre, I think, is going to get in. He was a compiler, but he's going to get in. And Billy Wagner. Those are the guys I would put in. I can't put in Todd Helton. I explained why. The statistics, especially when we didn't use the humidor at Coors Field, are just outrageous. His OPS is just outrageous at Coors Field compared to on the road. And and Joe Mauer, I understand he has the highest batting average of catchers of all time, but he's not even in the top 15 for guys throwing runners out.
Yeah, Mauer's getting
Bob Brenly is actually better than him, and he only had 143 homers. So that's where I stand. I don't know where you guys stand, but I figured I'd pass it around. I know Kevin maybe even voted for it back in the day. I don't know.
No, I never did vote on that in baseball. But,
Okay.
I'm a Beltre guy, and Wagner was a dominant, reliever. I don't share your love of Rollins. Not that he was a good player, because he was, but I just don't know that I would. And you know how I feel about, you can't penalize someone for things that are out of control, like where they play. So he can only perform where he's at.
And they factored that in when Larry Walker was put in. So I think Helton eventually.
Walker did a lot though in Montreal, though he did.
Yeah, and he had a few good years in St. Louis afterwards. So when I wrote for Full Press, I was going to update it, before the announcement was going to be made. Is it made today or tomorrow?
Tomorrow night. That's why I ran the article quick.
Yeah, I'm gonna. But I had Mauer because his numbers as a catcher are almost without peer. An MVP, a batting title as a catcher. He was fantastic. I had Beltre. Now, there are some suspicions with Beltre, but it's never been proven. Right. It's never been. It's not out there on any report. Although that doesn't seem to matter because David Ortiz made it, and David Ortiz is widely known as being a steroid cheat. But they still let him in because they love his personality. The one guy I had on my list was, and I know he won't get in because of the fact that he's a PED guy, but he admitted it and he fessed up to it. Was Andy Pettitte. His numbers are Hall of Fame caliber, but probably he is not going to get in because he took not steroids, but he took the recovery. At least that's what he said. HGH. Thank you very much. But his numbers are Hall of Fame caliber, but he's probably not going to make it. There are some guys, thankfully, anybody who is implicated in steroids should never get in. A-Rod, Sheffield, Manny Ramirez, these guys, their numbers are fantastic, but you don't know if they're for real or not. So that's why I would never ever let them in.
And then in football, hey, I'm happy for Kevin Allen and I'm sad for Mike. That's it. That's my opinion.
I really wanted to see Buffalo and Detroit get in, and I think that the nation wanted to see that. Mike made a good point about, I think, people a little weary. I love watching Mahomes play. I just think,
me too,
as a playoff quarterback, he's just the best.
Oh, he's incredible. It has nothing to it has nothing to do with his talent. He's supremely talented.
Yeah.
But take it from the Buffalo perspective. We're watching this game, and every commercial is Kelsey and Mahomes and Andy Reid. It's State Farm, and it's the MasterCard commercial. It's just beaten over the head. And then every time Kansas City does one good play, they shoot up to the press box, and it's Patrick Mahomes' wife with Taylor Swift. It was just beaten over the head. And, I picked Kansas City to win. I didn't think the Bills were going to win because their defense was gashed by injuries all year and then gashed even worse against Pittsburgh. And that's why I thought they were going to lose. But when you're down 3 points with 8 minutes to go and you hold the ball all that time and, your best receiver drops a almost sure touchdown and, your quarterback makes a throw to the end zone, which had they scored the touchdown, Mahomes would have taken them right down the field.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we all know that.
Or he would have tried.
Yeah.
Buffalo didn't lose that game because they didn't stop Mahomes. They lost
Right.
that game because the receivers are hot garbage, and they should be on the market right now trying to get them. The receivers cost that game. Drop balls, not looking at passes, even worse. It was deplorable how bad they were.
Yeah.
And the period at the end. Like, Mahomes doesn't play Allen, so you can't say Mahomes beat Allen. He beat the Buffalo defense.
Yes.
That's all he did. He did enough to beat the Buffalo defense. It was riddled. Allen did not do enough, nor did the receivers.
Yeah.
Well, I won't say Allen didn't do enough, but the receivers didn't do enough to beat the KC defense. It was pretty bad. And I'm a guy who watched a lot of Seahawks this year. So I know bad.
I mean that Russ is right that Allen fumbled in the fourth quarter, but luckily it got recovered by one of his offensive linemen. But in 2 playoff games, he played almost near perfect, and he had to based on what was on the other side of the ball. Now the thing is, and
we could have all blamed McDermott. Look, that call by McDermott that was a horrible call, and then you were lucky. The Bills were lucky that the ball was McCall Hardeman fumbled the ball in the end zone. If that didn't happen, that may have been the moment where McDermott lost them the game.
I don't care what happens between now and the end of the season. The worst call of the year, not only for the Bills in the past, and they had a lot of bad calls, but the worst call of the year was the fake punt in his own zone at 4th and 5 and giving it to Damar Hamlin, who can't run that was the brutal. Russ, that was the football equivalent of Tampa Bay pulling Blake Snell when he had a no-hitter going in the World Series. It was
Pacheco got the next run like 29 yards and then got him within the 3. If that all would have happened and KC would have scored, McDermott would be the guy getting blamed, I think.
Oh my God, it was just terrible. Anyway, let's start the show. Enough with football. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, January 22nd, 2024.
I'm Pete Tesse sitting in with the heavy hitters here.
I'm Russ Cohen. I wish the camera was a little more wide right, but this will do.
I'm Kevin Allen, and I haven't missed anything. I'm picking up right where I left off with Russ giving it to Mike a little bit. So,
and I'm Mike Agello. Read between the lines, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. All right, let's start with the news of the day. The signing by the Edmonton Oilers of Corey Perry to a 1-year deal, actually, just to finish out the year at the league minimum $775,000. Perry had his contract terminated in Chicago late last year we still don't know what the reasons for. Apparently, according to Elliot Friedman, they had been pursuing Perry going in even before Chicago had signed him in the summer, but he couldn't turn down a $4 million contract with a $2 million signing bonus to come in and sort of caretaker Connor Bedard. But he gets the contract terminated. It still hasn't been determined. I guess they still have 90 days to whether they can appeal that through the PA. So that may happen. But Kev, he's going to finish the year with the Oilers. And the Oilers, who are the hottest team in the NHL right now, much to my chagrin, add a player who is a very effective bottom 6 forward at this point in his career.
Yeah, and it's a good fit. I mean, I think they were looking for that kind of guy. And, you want a guy that's been around the block a little bit, that's had success in the postseason. He certainly qualifies in that regard. And, he still plays a gritty game. And I'm assuming, I don't know this for sure, that they did their due diligence and investigated what went on with Chicago and determined that, either it was a one-off situation, that, he wouldn't have that sort of situation again. or they just decided it wasn't big enough to be a concern for them. But either way, I mean, I think they feel like they've gotten a bargain, and I don't think Chicago has any regrets about the way they handled it. They
had to do what they had to do.
Yeah, exactly. And, the situation was different there. I think it involved, some team personnel as well.
And they needed to have some transparency this time because they didn't in the past. I think that was important for Chicago.
Yeah, too. And I really think they really didn't have any leeway because, they hired someone who was in charge of making sure they did everything by the book. And, I was told by someone who knows that that person, I don't know whether it's a him or a her, said right from the beginning, no, this has to be how it's handled. This is what you have to be said. I mean, they didn't even tell the coach or the players, what was going on, and that's what they were told they had to do. So they did it. So
Peter, the Blackhawks couldn't really have much transparency in this because. Because of the situation, I think it would have violated certain things if they had. They couldn't come out and say exactly why they got rid of them, but they wanted to maintain after everything that has happened in the last year or two. I always use the phrase being cleaner than Caesar's wife. They really have to be based on what has happened in the past. So that's what happened in the Perry situation. But Edmonton is in a different place right now. They're trying to win a Stanley Cup. They're trying to convince two players to stay around for the long haul in Draisaitl and McDavid. And if they don't win, there's a possibility one or both of them leave. So they're doing everything they possibly can to win now.
Yeah. And, I think the thing with this is they've got to find the missing piece, and it's the thing that's holding them back. And this is a low risk, potentially high reward move. And Kevin kind of hit it on there. It's why not? I don't like it as if you're a division rival, you're going to have to face them. I don't like it, but there you go. It is what it is. It's happened, and now we'll see where it unfolds.
Yeah, one more point on this, and I've had this discussion with people around. Some people didn't like it, thought that the Chicago should have been more transparent. But the thing that I would bring up, and we all work for companies, or we have worked for them through the years. And when have you ever seen someone within the company that was fired that they came out and explained exactly what had happened? You never get any of it.
No, it's true. You never get any.
Because, you can't really do that. So I think in this case, Chicago did what they were told they have to do. And that includes, you don't explain exactly why the person was fired. You just say it was, for the lack of better phrasing, conduct unbecoming. And you move it out. But, I've certainly been part of an organization that's fired people, and they don't put a memo out saying exactly what happened. They just say he's no longer with us, he or she.
Another interesting note, there was a story written by Luke Fox of Sportsnet regarding Ryan Reeves, Russ. Ooh. And Ryan Reeves apparently came out in this interview and said, I've been healthy for 2 weeks, and he's on injured reserve. So the reason he hasn't been activated is because he stinks and he can't play anymore.
Well, this is when Ryan Reeves stops becoming a team player and can be divisive because he wants to play. He wants to do his thing. He doesn't want to be, told he can't play. And so now he's going to make the GM look bad by saying he's healthy. How is that good for the team? It's not.
It's not.
But he doesn't care.
Yeah, and this is the problem, Kev. I'm sure other teams are going to say, well, this guy's healthy. Why is he being stored on injured reserve? Now, they don't have him on LTIR, so they're not trying to make an end around on the cap. But, and other teams have sort of buried players on IR when, they're sort of working their way back. But this could go one of two ways. He gets activated and then he gets waived, which I think probably is the best course of action because he can't play anymore, or they activate him and they send somebody else who's been helpful to the team, like a William Lagesson or somebody like that, and they send them down to the minors. But this makes a situation, he's sort of pushing his way in, and he's just not that good of a player anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there is no, as you mentioned, no cap game here, but it's still against the rules. I mean,
Yes.
you're basically, adding an extra player to your roster because he should be on.
Right.
You have to make a decision. So, this should be investigated by the league. You shouldn't be able to do this. I mean, with his salary and the way it is, I mean, it's not that big a deal, but it's a violation of the rules. So,
I mean, if I'm Brad Treliving, I just send him down to the AHL.
cut him.
Yeah.
He's got 2 years left in his contract, and which I know Russ said, and this is the thing. Russ said it was a joke. I admitted it was a joke, but if they do waive him and send him to the minors, there's no cap implications. It's just money out of the pocket of the Leafs. So, and you could buy him out at the end of the year, or you could just bury him every year for 2 more years if he wants to finish out his career in the American Hockey League as a 38 and 39-year-old. Then that's what he's going to do. All right. The big news of the weekend, I'll go to you first, Peter, on this one, is the hiring of Patrick Waugh as the coach of the New York Islanders, replacing Lane Lambert. I'm not surprised that Lane Lambert got fired because the Islanders have sort of been underachieving. I did not expect Patrick Waugh. And when we were all talking about it in our group text, Anthony said something, well, we got something to talk about off the post on Saturday, and I didn't know what he was talking about, and then saw the Islanders as Patrick Waugh, and I'm like, holy crap. What did you think of this, Peter? Peter, what did you think of the?
Well, I mean, I saw that, and I didn't have Patrick Waugh going to the Islanders on my bingo card. That, I mean, out of all the things coming out, that wasn't there. And I mean, hey, if you want to shake something up, I don't have a problem with it. It's going to be interesting. And I think, what was one tweet I saw? We've got Laviolette, Torts, and Waugh all in the same division now.
Yeah, that's a little wild.
Like that, there is an entertainment aspect to this. It's a results-driven business. Coaches are under a lot of pressure. There's a lot of money at stake. There's a lot of ego at stake. There's a lot of things to balance. Waugh, he's got nothing to lose. And frankly, I think it's great entertainment. I hope it works out because it's a results-driven business, but why not? He may have the shortest run. He may have a shorter run than Boudreau for all we know, but let's see what happens. This could be really fun.
Kev, like I said, I mean, he was the last name I expected. I actually thought, if had the stuff in Columbus not happened, I thought the guy that was going to possibly be the Lane Lambert replacement would have been somebody like Babcock. But obviously, when everything had happened in Columbus, he got hired there, and then everything that came out, he's persona non grata. But Waugh and Lou does not. To me, it sounds like fire and gasoline. But what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, I think that's fair to characterize it like that, but I do think it actually makes sense. And there's a lot to unpack here from, my perspective, because there's the Red Wings angle. I'm covering the Red Wings now, as everybody knows, and from that perspective, the Red Wings. He was like Darth Vader to the Red Wings during the feud. Patrick Waugh, I'm speaking about. They thought they got rid of him when he retired, and then he came back, obviously, as a coach. Then they had to deal with him again in that regard, and it looked like they were didn't have to deal with him again when he stopped coaching Colorado. But now he's back, and the New York Islanders are 2 points behind them in the playoffs. And
right.
A lot of people don't think this makes sense, but I think it makes perfect sense for this reason. I think Lou Lamoriello has always believed that coaches can make a difference. He used to come back behind the bench to stir up his team, to bring a little passion, to get everybody excited, to get them stirred up. And anybody who read the story about Patrick Waugh's first practice session with the team, when he was very loud in his instructions, he was yelling at things and getting everybody all stirred up. And then his game was the same thing. A passion was the word that you heard. And it's interesting. After that happened, rarely do you hear players say, we needed to change. They always say, it's on us. And you did hear that from the Islanders players, because I think they saw. I mean, Lane Lambert was low key. He was
kind of overwhelmed, don't you think, Kev? I think he got overwhelmed.
That might be fair, Russ, because it just didn't. He just didn't seem. He couldn't get out of the assistant role mode,
right?
And so he just never made it work. But I think Patrick Waugh might be exactly what they need to get everybody kind of stirred up and fired up and getting ready to go. And they're still in this race. They've got some good things going on. They got goaltending. They got defense. And kind of see what happens. But I think this could be a good fit for them.
The weird thing is that looking where the Islanders are this year, I mean, they're supposed to be a very good defensive club, and they haven't been. And Sorokin, I think, has suffered. He's played well, but they're not. They have not been as strapped down defensively as they have been in the past. And I have a feeling that the reason that is they were trying to generate more offense.
That is what it was. They changed a few months ago to open things up.
Yeah, and Kev, I since I cover the Sabres for the Hockey News, I'm well aware of what's going on with them. And it's sort of similar to the Islanders. You have teams that have a certain DNA. With the Islanders, it's defensive hockey. With the Sabres last year, it was offense. They scored almost 300 goals. And in each instance, their coaches are trying to get them to play against type. The Islanders, more wide open. The Sabres, better defensively. And what has happened? Both of them have suffered because of it, because they can't, as of right now, they can't walk and chew gum at the same time. And that's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, all you got to do is look at the Boston Bruins and realize that tradition matters. I mean, the Boston Bruins have been playing the same way for a lot of years, even the Philadelphia Flyers to a lesser extent. But, Flyers hockey is always aggressive and everything else. And, there is, you put it right. It's the DNA. And, I think Lou Lamoriello has always demanded of his teams that they play with a passion and persevere and be relentless. And they really just weren't that team. And I think Patrick Waugh will be a good fit for them because of that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I had said there was no question Lane Lambert was on the hot seat for weeks and weeks and weeks. But they were sort of still in the playoff race, so Lou kind of let it go. They need their playoff revenue. That's why the Islanders need to make the playoffs. They don't sell out as much as you think, and it's an expensive place that they're in, and they want their playoff revenue. And so, I think Waugh's very good at lighting a fire under everybody. There's no question. He is still a defensive coach. And there are people that will respect him just because he's Patrick Waugh. So you can get some mileage out of that. But again, we've seen sometimes when big, names are coaches that it goes the other way too. And so we don't know. But they got their first win under him. And right now those 2 points are important. So who am I to knock the signing?
Peter, I'm going to ask this question somewhat in jest, but since you're attuned to the fan bases of both Winnipeg, who will play a certain team in a home and home series this week, and Vancouver, who played said Toronto Maple Leafs on Saturday. Why does the rest of Canada hate the Leafs?
Because the Leafs are shoved down everyone's throat on TV all the time on 3 different networks. That's why. Like, half of Canada loves the Leafs. You can't go to a building in Canada without a whole bunch of rogue Leafs fans showing up, and it's the same with the Canadians. Interesting enough, you go to a place like Winnipeg where there wasn't a team for a long time. I'll tell you who shows up. You'll get a ton of Bruins fans, a ton of Leafs fans, a ton of Canadians. You get a fair amount of Oilers. You get the odd Canucks, odd Flames. You know who you get a ton of here? Flyers.
Flyers.
That's interesting.
Just not surprising given the history of the team and some of the players here, but it's actually insane how many Flyers fans come out.
Rangers, because they've had a lot of Winnipeg guys on their team over the years.
Bobby Clark, what's his face? Riverton Rifle. Why does everyone hate the Leafs? Because they like, without being silly about it, there's over coverage of it. And the biggest joke is, okay, let's see, pick a news story. Well, it has nothing to do with hockey. How does that affect the Leafs? Because that's what will be run with on 3 different channels. Right. Justin Trudeau is voted out of office. How will that affect the Leafs? Like, pick your thing. And it becomes what we were talking about in the pre-show with what you said about Buffalo and with the Chiefs. Everything that happened with the Chiefs, up to the booth. What's going on with Taylor Swift? What's the Kelsey brother doing? All these things. Oh, look at the ads with that. And it just becomes the same way. They're on all the sponsorship. Yep. They're on all things. And people get tired with it.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
And they're not that good.
Right. That's my point. People get sick of the Chiefs because they've won 2 Super Bowls and Mahomes is on every commercial. The Leafs haven't won in 56 years, and I don't see Austin Matthews in commercials being shoved down people's throats.
I have a surprise quiz here because I was looking up, Winnipeg-born players. Who is the number 1 scoring Winnipeg-born player in NHL history?
Butch Goring.
No. Butch Goring is not even in the top 5.
Winnipeg,
born in Winnipeg, Mike.
Thank you, Russ.
Max
Domi.
Taves is number 2.
Okay.
Max Domi is.
No, he was born.
Max Domi's 15.
Yeah.
He was born in Toronto. So
by the way, my buddy Pete Stemkowski is number 9.
Okay, give it to us because we can't waste them.
Andy Bathgate.
Oh, there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Former Leaf.
Because that's what I was saying. The Rangers do have a history having Winnipeg-born players, but I didn't realize Bathgate would be the top guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No idea.
But Kev, going back to my point, obviously being in Buffalo, Sabres fans, I think that a close second to winning the Stanley Cup would be eliminating Toronto from the playoffs. There's a visceral hatred of Toronto in Buffalo because Toronto fans invade the building all the time.
Yeah.
I watched Detroit play Toronto last weekend, and I've never seen Dylan Larkin celebrate more in my life than when he scored the game-winning goal against the Leafs.
Well, I mean, obviously, as you know, he's got a lot of relatives in Toronto, so so that's part of it. But what's interesting about that, and Peter's point is certainly valid about hockey night in Canada and seeing Toronto, but those days really are kind of gone. Like, I mean, if you want to watch your team, you got plenty of options to watch your team.
You do, but Canada broadcast rules are very different, Kevin, than maybe other areas, and it can actually get quite difficult. It's all you're right. You can watch your team, and even more so on a Saturday night. It's just that here's the other reason hate the Leafs. Well, do the Leafs ever have to play a game outside their time zone if it's in Canada? Because everything's just moved to their time zone as well.
Yeah, but that's not them. That's CBC.
No, I know. But it's because they're the Leafs.
It is something that fans could look at and say, why is that? And we understand.
Why do they get an advantage?
Well, because 1/3 of the population of the country is in the GTA, and they want to cater to them. It's not the Maple Leafs that do it.
But it's because of the Maple Leafs being that team.
Right. That's what gets it.
Yeah, and so where's the home ice advantage? Oh, you got to play it an off hour.
I mean,
too bad. So sad.
All these things we've been talking about, it's like the Todd Helton argument, are things that are totally out of the team's control. I mean, it's just ridiculous to dislike players. I mean, it's the same thing with
I don't think it's a dislike of the players
or the team.
Dislike of the sweater.
It's not. it's not like the team can't help it that they're popular with television producers and all that. I mean, on Twitter, I'm just seeing all these people talking about Taylor Swift and who cares?
I don't care.
The reason that Mahomes and KC are on the TVs because they're so popular. Yeah. So I mean, you're just doing what you do. I mean,
but
I don't know.
That's a product of CBS, Kev. That's a I mean, nobody would care about Taylor Swift being in the press box in Buffalo or in any other of the games. But every time Kelsey adjusts his helmet, they go up to the press box to see what Taylor Swift.
Who cares? I watched that game and they went up a lot, but each time they went, it was like 4 seconds. It didn't disturb my interest in the game. And I'd say that's true for most people. If you want to look for
Jerry Jones, they showed Jerry Jones 4 times a game.
Yeah. What's the big deal about that?
Jerry Jones has had more facelifts. Never mind.
But I do buy into your argument, Mike, that I think people do like to see new teams involved in big games. I do think that it's time for the Chiefs to lose because they'd like to see their team get in, or at least somebody else a little differently. So
yes,
I think that's fair.
I'm rooting for the Lions, the 49ers, and the Ravens. So you can tell who I'm not rooting for.
Yeah, you got your bases covered there.
Yeah, the team I'm rooting for is the Lions.
Yes.
Because I feel like the Lions, as a Jet fan, I feel like I have to root. Plus, I did want Aaron Glenn as a coach for the Jets, and the fact that they wouldn't even give him the time of day when he was such a good player for them annoyed me. So I would like to see him get some success.
Well, I have to change my spiel though now, because I said for years, and I'm 69 years old, and the Lions had won only one playoff game in my lifetime, one playoff win in 69 years.
Yeah.
Now it's 3. so it's they got double their win total. So
all right, I just want to touch on this for just for shits and giggles. We're now 6 weeks away from the trade deadline, so things are not going to pick up until after the All-Star break. The All-Star break, you're going to have the GMs probably all in Toronto, and agents too, and they're going to be talking, and that these teams are going to wait until the absolute last minute for cap reasons. But okay, I look at start with the Western Conference because we always start in the East. Peter, Winnipeg, they're 1 point up in the Central Division. It's going to be a battle with them in Colorado and Dallas. It sounds like Cheveldayoff is going to be a buyer, but it's a question of what he's going to buy. From what I've heard, it seems like they're focusing more on a forward than anything. What have you heard, and what do you think the perfect fit there would be?
Well, we talked a little bit about this last week, and I think nothing's really changed. What was shown on Saturday against Ottawa is that the Jets need center depth.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a question of should he do it. It's a question of you might as well do it, because if something else happens, you're in deep doo-doo. It's, so you can take your pick, whether it's renting Lindholm. We talked about Adam Henrique. I think there is a case that the people are making arguments, and I think I trust Russ in this, and I bet you Kevin says the exact same thing, that you could go make a pitch to Buffalo for Middlestat, but I think that's an off-season decision, not a trade deadline one. Something would have to go very strange that way.
Right.
One name, and I would be very curious about, depending on where Seattle goes, if you're looking for depth, I'm not saying it's a great move, is Wenberg out of Seattle.
Yeah.
I think that could be an interesting depth signing that was sort of, not that I think it's the best thing that could be done, but it would play into Cheveldayoff's sort of playbook. It would align with how he does some things. I wouldn't, there's some talk about Monahan out of Montreal too.
He's available.
I think I've heard the asking price for Monahan is a first and a prospect. I think that's unreasonable. And I think, the only reason you get into that territory, and that prospect better be a long shot prospect, is you want to beat out someone else. So right now, Montreal is going to try and drive a bidding war. And this now it becomes a game of brinksmanship. Who plays first on that?
The reason on the Monahan thing, Kev, is because I believe his salary is $1.5 million. So they can get all the contenders who are looking for centers like Boston or Colorado in on that, and they can fit that that contract, and in fact, they can make it a $750,000 deal by retaining 50%. So they're probably going to end up getting that from somebody because of the salary being so low.
Yeah, that you're right on that, and I think they are going to be suitors. I mean, I've heard Boston's name mentioned with them pretty prominently as well, and I think there are other teams out there, and there's so few players available that doesn't cause salary cap consternation that, right. Like you said, that just makes him more valuable. And but I like that fit from Winnipeg. Don't you, Russ? Do you like that fit for Winnipeg?
Yeah, I do think it's a good fit. I'm also looking, from the perspective of what the Sharks have, and if you don't want to give up that much, like a Nico Sturm, someone like that, if they're willing to give him up, you get some size. At least he can fill in at center. That's not bad. I mean, so I wouldn't mind looking at him either.
I think they're looking for something a little more higher impact than him, but
but you got to give up more for that too. So
right, and Peter, the thing is, this is an opportunity for Winnipeg. I mean, I know that they're not, they don't have a bunch of expiring contracts now that Hellebuck and Scheifele are signed, but this is sort of a strike while the iron is hot opportunity here, where they're really good. They're really good now, and they could win it if they add one player at the deadline and get a fortunate break in terms of who they match up with in the first two rounds of the playoffs. So, if I was Cheveldayoff, I would roll the dice and trade a prospect to get that player that might help him over the top.
I think he will. I just don't know what that prospect is.
Right.
I think he'd rather give up picks. I mean, obviously McGrody is untouchable.
No, you can't. Listen, I Rucker McGrody, you trade him, and it doesn't matter if you win or not. You're going to be sad in the end.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a kid who even screams Winnipeg Jets in terms of who he is as a person. So I mean, all the people out there talking, well, we can get you can't. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I'm rooting for that kid, Peter, because we bumped into him after the draft in Montreal. I shook his hand and I congratulated him, and he was a good kid, and I really hope that he turns out to be good, because he played great for the U.S. at the World Junior. But
and I think the other part about the deadline right now as we limp into this. As fans and observers, and I'm not talking to anyone other than the odd person who hasn't heard much right now, particularly the Jets, we're speculating based on where people sit with positioning in the standings,
right?
Who's got impending free agents, underperforming players, situations. There's a whole host of other conversations that are going on too, feeling out, understanding who's expendable that we're maybe not hearing yet. And I guess, Kevin, you would understand that too from, as we move along, you start hearing some different things about like other names sort of turn over in time, particularly after the All-Star break, right? We start really getting a sense of there could be some other things. And I think that's when we're going to have a clear picture, because things will get leaked out for leverage and stuff like that. I'll have a clear picture of where some of the teams who are looking to add talent. The question I have now is as we move into the deadline, and you can pick any team, and we can talk about the Leafs and the sort of the news that Elliot Friedman brought up about maybe not being buyers, but do we have the potential for a fairly active deadline this year based on who's in probable opportunity to take a run this year? How do you guys feel about that? Because I'm sort of curious about that.
Kev, you first on that.
Well, I still think there's a salary cap issue.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the biggest problem. But I do think there are some teams like, for example, the Red Wings. Nobody knows what they're going to do. Would they go out and try to get some help? he being Steve Yzerman is very hard to project. And, who would have thought that they would have gone after Patrick Kane, but they did. And, so he might go out and do something. I think it's important to him that they make the playoffs. The team has played well. They found a goalie. It's changed everything. And, we'll see what happens.
Well, I was going to say, if they do go after somebody, where? what position do they go after? Defense.
Well, if they could find a center, and move JT Comfer. He's playing number 2 center. If they could move him to third, I mean, would be an exceptional number 3 center.
Right.
So, I mean, I think they would do that. But, one thing that's sort of been lost on everyone is that, the Red Wings are 4th in the league in scoring. Like, there's no logical explanation for that. None. They don't have anybody in the top 39 scorers in the league. So,
balance.
Well, people always kind of talk about that scoring by committee, but that's usually baloney. That means usually that's code for we don't have great scoring.
Right.
But in this case, they really are doing that. I mean, they have a chance to, I think, get 11 or 12 players with 40 or more points. I mean, here's that old Daniel Sprong thing again. Story on this tomorrow. Leads the league in points per minute. 11 minutes, 50 seconds per game, 11 goals, 30 points.
Yeah, it's incredible the production. It is.
He was close to that with Seattle. I think he was.
No,
he was the 4th liner.
Yeah, no, it's the same thing. They've moved now. In fairness, they moved him up. He's the guy when there's a hole to fill in the top 6.
Right.
They slot him in there because offensively he's got the shot, he's got the skating, and he just does a lot of things that coaches don't like defensively, and that's why he ends up on the 4th line. He had a funny line last night where he said he got in on a breakaway and he said, I thought I better shoot because Twitter's been all over me for not shooting enough. So, first time ever I've heard players talk about fan reaction to their game. So
now Vancouver, there's a lot of talk on the weekend when Toronto was playing them about where Vancouver is going to go in terms of adding at the deadline. They have cap restrictions as well. You look at them, and obviously Pettersson is phenomenal. JT Miller and Besser having really good years, and Quinn Hughes is Quinn Hughes, and Demko is probably the leading candidate for the Vezina. A lot of people think it's adding one more.
Excuse me.
He's going to say.
I know. No, I mean Hellebuck, yes, but the Demko is in the running too.
Okay, you said leading.
Well, okay. Excuse me. Sorry about that, Peter. That was subtle. But the name that is coming out as a target for them is Jake Gensel. Obviously, because of Tockett's affiliation with Pittsburgh, he coached Gensel as an assistant coach, and he's a UFA. And the question is whether Pittsburgh is really in it at the deadline and whether Kyle Dubas, because that team, they're really hurting in terms of prospects and draft picks. And they got to start to refill the coffers. And it's a question of whether they're going to go down that road, whether they trade Gensel and then try to re-sign him in the offseason. But, I mean, Peter, you see Vancouver more than I do. Do you think Gensel is a fit for them in terms of what they're looking for?
I think he wouldn't hurt. What do the Canucks really need? And that's the thing that I think is
teams when they get a lead, teams are not afraid of coming back against the Canucks.
Yeah, they were up 3-0 against Toronto after the first period, and it was 3-3 like that.
Is that a personnel roster problem, or is it a culture problem, or is it a coaching problem?
No,
and how do you solve that by bringing in a player like Gensel?
I don't think their defense is particularly great defensively. I mean, you've got veterans like Tyler Myers, who they're big, and Zadorov, who's big, but they're both sort of limited in terms of their speed and can be beaten. I mean, Hughes is great, but he's not particularly great defensively. He's one of these offensive defenseman who
I would argue that a little bit. I think he's good defensively.
You're good defensively by getting the puck out of the zone.
Thank you.
Doesn't matter, but he's good defensively.
Yeah. He's not exactly Rod Langway, but when he has the puck and he's attacking into the offensive zone, he doesn't have to be great defensively. He's got the puck.
Yeah.
But Kev, I mean, Pittsburgh, it's a question right now. I don't conceive of them being a legitimate playoff. If they get in by the skin of their teeth. And Dubas has to be of the mindset, if I have an asset to trade and I can't get him signed and I don't have the cap space, then he's got to maximize those assets. I mean, what do you think of the whole stuff?
Yeah. Well, first of all, what I would say is I think Vancouver would benefit by a really good defenseman. If you think you can make even a little bit of noise, you got to try to do that. The problem is you never can find those guys at the trade deadline, and you can find guys like Jay Gunsel, and I don't care how much offense you got, Jay Gunsel will make you better because he's a very skilled goal scorer, and but saying all that, they're going to want a lot. Number one. For him, and there'll be a number of suitors. Number two, and I don't think they've totally committed to the idea that they're going to have to move him, even though their cap situation is a mess. I mean, it's hard to walk in. Probably easier now that Mario is not the principal owner, but still, it's not easy to walk into Sidney Crosby and say, Sid, the guy that you really like playing with, and you have played so well this year. But that that guy, he's going to be gone next year because we can't afford him. That's hard. That's a hard sell. So
that's his best friend.
And Russ, more than likely, if Dubas is willing to trade Gensel to Vancouver, the names he's going to ask for. He's going to ask for Willander. He's going to ask for Lekkerimäki. He may not get either one of them.
Lekkerimäki.
What's that?
They have zero shot at getting Lekkerimäki.
He's going to ask Russ. I mean, I don't think that Alvin and Rutherford will do it, but I think he's going to ask. And the thing is, Dubas and Rutherford, they've made deals before when Dubas was in Toronto, so there's a line of communication there, and so I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility. But Kevin's right. I mean, if they're probably going to exhaust every opportunity to try to sign Gensel. And the talk is that Dubas is going to talk to his agent at the All-Star break. But if they can't make any progress, then and if they're dropping out of the playoff race, then it's probably gonna happen. Peter referenced the Leafs, the report from Elliot Friedman on the weekend regarding Brad Treliving. I mean, it's refreshing to have a general manager who I think has a realistic outlook of where this team is, which they're not winning the Stanley Cup now. I mean, the problem is here, Kev, is that sort of like I make the comparison to the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen is in the prime of his career, and he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Josh Allen's not the problem. The problem is the team surrounding Josh Allen. Austin Matthews is not the problem. Neither is William Nylander or Mitch Marner or John Tavares. It's the fact that you're paying all this money in a cap system to four guys, and you cannot surround them with a good enough team around them to make them be able to win. And I mean, it sounds like right now Treliving recognizes that there are flaws with this team, that he can't plug all the holes, that he's not willing to trade the prospects and the draft picks that they have on hand. And he's basically saying, he's not saying I'm going to be a seller, but he's not saying I'm going to be a buyer and we're all in. No, you can't be all in because I don't think they can fill all the holes that they need to fill to be a legitimate Stanley Cup contender this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly. I mean, I don't disagree that it's their depth that because you like their key players, but Vegas won like that last year. I mean, relatively speaking, they have a bunch of guys that make a lot of money, but they had the right collection. So I mean, you just got to start moving people around and try to get the right blend. I know they've continued to try to do that and it hasn't worked, but I don't think they have to trade one of those guys. So I still don't. And the cap's going up, and it's going to continue to go up. I just think you got to keep going until you try to find the right mix.
I just think they're going to, if they sell at the deadline, it'll be a low-end asset. I don't think they're going to give away any prospects. I don't think they're selling anybody of value because I think it's just a bad look for them. I think if they throw up the white flag like that, it's not going to play well.
Well, okay, they really. I mean, Samsonov has no value because he struggled this year. So, their UFAs, Domi. Probably, you're probably not going to do that because at most you're going to get a mid-round draft pick. Bertuzzi might get a return, but he's got a no-move clause because he signed a one-year deal. He only goes if he wants to go somewhere. and that might mitigate what they can get back. So it's not the question of them being able to sell, them being sellers. It's them wasting more assets as buyers when they'd have to add too much, and they don't have the cap space anyway. So I just think that they're probably going to end up standing pat, or at the absolute worst, just adding like a depth defenseman or something like that. Hope they make the playoffs and hope that lightning strikes. But I just don't see it. And the thing is, Austin Matthews is on pace to score 70 goals this year, Kev. That's the thing. Yeah. They're wasting prime years of their core group because they cannot structure a team to be good enough around them.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're right, but we're 32 teams now. It's hard to.
Yeah, it's harder.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's just so much harder than it used to be. So you got to, you're fighting now. The first layer is so much more difficult.
Right.
Getting into the playoffs and the battle is just so, it wasn't all that long ago that it was, you just had to be better than 5 teams and you're in the playoffs,
Right.
And now you got to be better than half the league just to make it.
Yeah. So, and the other part about the playoffs, Kevin, and I think you're bang on, is why go so hard on expenditures for something that has such a variable randomness to it in the events? Like, I think there's certain teams are wising up to this. Like if let's take on the Leafs here, because that's sort of how we entered into this. If I'm the Leafs, you're already feeding some things out that are sort of lowering the expectations. You're managing things. And I think it's a smart move. And if I'm Treliving, say, hey, we've had to do a few things. This is definitely a transition year. We're going to just let these guys go and see what they can do. We know who they are. We've had some turnover. We're going to give Sheldon our support. Go do what you've got to do. Adjust on there, but we're not going to give up things that are going to hurt us longer term for something that may not move the needle or can incrementally move it. I think that's smart.
You're saying that accountant, Peter, though. Like, as an example, there's always that feeling. What's the feeling like on a team? What is the feeling like at the beginning of the year? What's the feeling like now? So, as an example, when I was in the Avs locker room recently, and McKinnon had a 4-point game, he didn't even talk about his 4 points. He talked about everything else going right on his team and all these veterans they have. And there's a feeling there where they feel like they could win the cup because they've already done it.
Right. Yeah. Right.
They know what it's looking like. So, part of winning is also learning. And, like you look at the Jets in 2018, they didn't really do much. And they just went in there and said, we're going to just let these guys go. The other thing I think is I think, Canucks they're the West Coast version of the Leafs, but with a whole bunch of different problems in terms of fan base expectations, hunger for a win, blah, blah, blah. And there's pressure there because they may not strike lightning again. There's this uncertainty around Pettersson, although I think that's a little overblown.
I don't think they're in danger of losing him.
No, I don't think they are. And I don't think the ownership will let it happen. No. It's just going to be a lot more complicated now. But there's a sense that we've got to make a shot for it because these opportunities don't come around very often. So I think there's that same level of pressure, but not as big because it's not as big a market. And I think there's that kind of thinking. But, in essence, there's a lot of young guys on the Canucks. Maybe just let them go. Maybe you get that extra defenseman, but you don't blow the bank on it. Right. And you guys, go in there. We believe in you. See what you can do. And just get talking to keep them loose and let the chips fall where they may. Because you do it right, they're going to have another run at this because they're that deep and they're in the right age arc as well.
They're the West Coast version of the Leafs with a better goaltender and with a legitimate number 1 defenseman, whereas the Leafs have a guy who's a number 2 and he's a lot older. But that being said, like I've advocated all this year, what the Leafs should be doing. Find out what you have in Joseph Woll. Find out what you have in young guys like Nyes and Robertson and Liljegren. Find out what you have because those guys are on cheap contracts and you've got to know whether they're going to be part of your future or not and then adjust accordingly. You cannot keep bringing in like Mark Giordano is at 40 years old I mean, unless they take a league minimum contract like he did, they cannot keep cobbling together a roster. They have to eventually start to promote from within. They have some decent prospects. They just never have given them the opportunity over the last few years to find out what they are. So, I mean, and then in the cap system, you have to have cheap contracts, meaning young guys coming up on their entry-level deals, because that enables you to spend money in other places.
Yeah, you got to have between 7 and 9. Like, we never talk about that, but GMs do all the time. They always, I've had this explained to me, the cap is really 15 players, because you always have between 7 and 9 guys that are making somewhere in the 1.1 to 700,000. Right. So you subtract that off your top. Now you're down to 75 million. So you got 15 guys that are averaging about 5 million. He said that's the way we look at it. Now, I've never seen anybody write that, but that's essentially, kind of how they view it. But I want to just maybe get the last word on this. I want to add to what Peter was saying, because I really like his thought process. What we should have learned with this increase in discussion of probability, it's more so in the NFL, but you're starting to see it's crept into the NHL as well. The probability of things happening. And it's all based on what's happened historically and what the odds are based on your records and all that kind of things like that. But what, after it all shakes out and everyone makes their deals, nobody in the league, no team has a probability of winning the cup that exceeds 40%. And 40% would really be high, and that's just the way it goes. You would think that we would have learned by then that, just like Peter said, maybe you should just be adding like a little piece to make it better and not like sell your soul.
Yeah.
That rental player, because, even if things go well, you're probably not going to win the cup. That's just the way it goes.
Yeah. I mean, Vegas added Barbashev, and Barbashev was a key player for their cup, but he wasn't like the star player.
I think the other thing is there's a financial component too, because if you could get to the cup, you're making some good money in the playoffs, right?
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Great show, guys. We will be back on Wednesday with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Pete Tessier, for Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.